In this episode,
So when you talk about over 100 million people in this country have prediabetes, that mTOR and AMPK, those two enzymes are really not doing what they're supposed to do.
They're not in sync. I want to take my health in my own hands a little
Yeah.
bit. I want to know what to do, and I don't want to just pop a pill.
No.
We run into people all the time, you and I both, that are on multiple medications, and they're toxic. We have to take some of this in our own hands, but we need to know what to do. She went home, and in 2 weeks, her doctor took her off the insulin. From
Wow,
the
that
supplement.
quickly?
Yeah, and I was surprised because I didn't expect it, and I didn't know why. I do intermittent fasting rarely, but
Yeah.
when I do it with that three-part thing. I take a supplement, I do it in a fasted state, and then I exercise, and it definitely works. It takes the fat off,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
and your strength will go up
Yeah.
because you're working out. So it's a win-win. You'll see a change.
Yeah.
I saw a change in 2 months with many people on just supplements. I didn't even talk to them about diet or exercise or intermittent fasting.
Welcome to Health in Focus with Jacobus. I am your host, Jacobus Hollowijn. Today, my guest is back in the studio, Rick Brunner. You can go back to the file and see the interview we did previously where he talked about his travels to the East Bloc nations back in the 70s, 80s, and what he learned over there and how he has taken that information into the United States. He was the person who actually introduced this country to creatine. And creatine is a very interesting product, not just for bodybuilders or people who work out, but it has several other benefits that maybe come up in this interview. The focus today is diabetes, and Rick is passionate about studying about diabetes. He has personal stories to tell and to share with us. And so there is a big issue with diabetes. It's an easy word. We all know the word, but what does it really mean? What are some of the causes? What are some of your symptoms? And do we actually have solutions? It doesn't always come in a medication. There are plenty other ways with diet and lifestyle and maybe some supplementation to reduce the symptoms of diabetes, to reduce the disease diabetes, and to actually live a healthy, strong life without many side effects that diabetes can cause. So without further ado, Rick, thanks for coming back on the
Thanks
show.
for having me on again. I
You
appreciate
bet.
it. Yeah.
This is a great topic,
It
and
is.
you and I have talked about it several times.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a kind of a personal story for you yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about the personal story.
Well, I was, as you know, originally involved in athletic performance nutrition. So I worked with a lot of very elite athletes and did nutrition development for them and coaches and whatnot. And then I had my own company for quite a while that did sports supplements. But about year 2000, my mom came to visit us here in Bozeman, and she put a little vial in the refrigerator. And I said, "Mom, what's that?" She said, "Well, that's my insulin. I'm diabetic." I said, "Oh, I didn't know you were diabetic." And at the time, we did manufacturing, so I went back and put together 3 supplement things together, and just to protect her from the damage from diabetes, you know, just to help with her health, because she wasn't taking anything else, really, just the medications. And I told her, "Just take that, go home and take it," and she did. And
So the medication was insulin?
her medication was insulin, and I think she was on metformin at the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that vial was...
Yeah, there's always a process to diabetes. There's metformin. There's other medications that do other things to improve blood sugar health, and then there's a kind of a last resort is insulin that you're now you need some more insulin for some reason.
Yeah.
So she went home, and in 2 weeks her doctor took her off the insulin.
Wow,
From the
that
supplements.
quickly?
Yeah, and I was surprised because I didn't expect it, and I didn't know why. And so about over the last 20 years or so, I've been studying this, and I did work with other people as well. Back then, I took the 3 supplements and I condensed it down to 1, and gave it to people. Just gave it to them, you know, that I knew had diabetes or were struggling. And Across the board, everybody did extremely well. It wasn't 2 weeks; it was about 2 months, and they saw a measured improvement. One gal, her name was Hope. She was a bank teller, and she was a Hispanic lady, and her legs were dark purple from her toes to her knees.
No way.
Yeah, and she was on a lot of insulin, and I gave that to her. And everybody that I worked with taught me something. And she taught me a very important thing. Blood sugar started to improve. Her insulin use dropped by at least half, which is good. But the thing she taught me was she had started having more energy. And before, what she would do, she was so fatigued that she would take a nap in her car at lunch. But now she had more energy, so she started to walk at lunch. And she started to move. And that hit me really hard because I realized that I call it flow, where we become stagnant. And diabetes is just a symptom of stagnation of the body. And so if we can get things moving and flowing through diet and exercise and even intermittent fasting and some supplements, we can really change the game. And so I spent the last 20 years reviewing and talking to scientists and looking at thousands of papers and just directing me to kind of what now science is really sharp. You know, in the old days of research, I would have to go to UC Berkeley or Stanford or UC Davis Medical School and plow through all kinds of giant books and then go to the stacks and try to find papers. And probably only about 20% of the time you'd find the paper because they can't hold it all. But now with the internet, I can access everything at the click of a button. I know what to look for. And so the science has really improved a lot. And now people need to know about these things. And so that's kind of my quest, is to help others with the problem.
So what are some of the studies? What are some of the studies telling us that it is a problem? But do the different studies, as you mentioned, do they approach it differently? You see some people approach it one way over the other. What are some examples of studies that you can tell us? Not like a title, but do some people say, "Oh, we studied metformin, on diabetes," or we studied diet, or we studied food additives, or things of that nature? What kind of studies are out there?
Well, since there's thousands of studies now,
exactly,
and they're published, and so anybody can have access to them. There's studies on how diet influences blood sugar health, how exercise improves blood sugar health, what kinds of exercise, what kinds of diet, what things to eat, what things to not eat, all those things. Intermittent fasting is very important too.
Really?
In other words, not feeding the body nutrients all the time, but actually giving it a break, and then turning on certain enzymes and gene pathways that are catabolic in the right direction, as in burning toxic fat, and then supplements and nutritional ingredient things that herbs and things, everything from fish oil to even creatine. They all have a home, but you need to know where to put them, because what we're trying to do. Let me back up a little bit. There's over 100 million pre-diabetics in the United States alone.
Over 100 million.
100 million.
That's almost a third of the population
in the United States.
Now, are those people who were officially diagnosed?
No, only about 20% of them have been told by their doctor that they're pre-diabetic.
So how did they come up with the number 100 million?
Well, just through all the studies that have been done. Yeah, not my studies, but just other scientists' studies, and consistently, and the government health organizations have also pegged it at that. It was about 90 million a few years ago, and I'm sure it's over 100 million now.
What age level are we talking about now?
Well, that goes. The age ranges from young people now.
Roughly what? 10? 6?
10 years
16?
old. 50, in the teens for sure.
In the teens?
I target and focus mostly on people over around 40, and there's a reason for that. Just to focus more on that market, because those people are a higher percentage of those 100 million.
Right. Right. That's interesting. When you go back, diabetes used to be considered more an age-related disorder, as far as age, like people over 40, as you mentioned, because over the decades they have, with their eating habits, they eat more carbohydrates than they should. and maybe not enough movement, and they are storing that, right? That's fair to say. But now, I think with the different foods that we find in grocery markets and the fast food industry growing, and so many people not eating 2 or 3 solid meals a day, but snacking to keep working. They feel they have to work, and they just snack on the go. I think it has started to affect younger people as well. And so now there is really an issue, because even though you say you're working on people over 40, or you like to focus on that group at this point, you know already that you're going to have to move the board, the boundary, or what do you call it, the goalpost, so to say, to a younger generation. Because if this has already happened to teenagers and people in the low 20s, where are they going to be in 20 years from now?
Right.
And I often tell people, if they don't feel good, I said, how long have you not felt good? And they said, for the last 4 or 5 years. I said, you are on a slippery slope. So you only pick up speed.
Yeah.
And 5 years from now, where do you think you're going to be?
Yeah.
And many people don't think that far out, that once they're slipping and sliding on the path of health, so to say, or disease, it's going to be really complicated for them to come out of it and to crawl back out of that hole.
Right.
So interesting that it first frustrates me that with all the food additives that we have, and like I just said, the fast food, that it is a growing concern amongst the young people. And I don't want to jump the gun over here, but sadly enough, I talk to enough people who ask me about their blood work, and I realize that many interesting things that could help us with kind of looking possibly at diabetes, those tests are not being done. And we get all this generic stuff that most people don't even know how to read. And now we don't have an A1C, which we can talk about. Fasting glucose is being tested but not being addressed enough. Triglycerides in cholesterol are very important, and they're not being discussed, or the reference ranges are off. But we'll get to that. But I just wanted to throw that in, especially to the viewers, that these are topics that we are going to discuss because they're so important, and at the same time they're very much ignored. So
yeah, and so I've really centered in on four parts to addressing this issue. One is diet, what people eat and drink, exercise, or lack of, intermittent fasting, and then nutritional supplements that act as signaling molecules for certain pathways and whatnot. So those 4 things can really help once you understand it. But the key is, my mantra is simplicity. Keep it simple. Things are so complex today, and there's so much information today on the internet and everything about this magic thing or this or that. And I look more holistically. And looking at thousands of science papers, I've seen it addressed holistically. It's out there. You just have to put it together and make it a cohesive system. And so that's what I'm working on, is that.
So what are some of the things you've learned? Diet, for example.
Well, diet is an extremely important part to all of this. Again, it's what we eat and what we don't eat, and now there are science papers on what are called obesogens, things that create extra fat in our body. And fat is dysfunctional fat, I call it toxic fat, is a big part of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. In science, there's a word called ectopic fat. Ectopic fat. We all know the word belly fat or visceral fat, but ectopic fat is another word that explains fat that's in places that it's definitely not supposed to be, like muscle, kidney, liver, and pancreas, things like that. And so that fat becomes toxic to the body. And I believe that the real cause, and a lot of scientists agree with this, the real cause of all of these pre-diabetic and diabetic problems are really mostly focused on the muscle. Because 80% of blood sugar is processed through muscle.
How's that?
It's just that's where it goes. It's got the transport proteins to take the blood sugar into cells is mostly in muscle. It's in other cells too, but it's in skeletal muscle cells. So about 80% of all your blood sugar has to go through your muscle.
To give it energy or to
Yeah, it's
to what?
for energy. It's just what it is. It's just
Yeah.
that's where it goes. And if it can't get into the muscle, then it flows around in the body. And
How could it not go into the muscle?
well, then we have a word called insulin resistance.
Okay.
Okay, and insulin resistance is primarily focused on muscle,
Okay.
and that the muscle cells resisting being able to pull the blood sugar in. So there's something wrong with the muscle. I say that muscle is the problem. Yeah, it's the biggest contributor to the problem that we have of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
So how do you get the muscle to work more efficiently?
Yeah.
And that's really the key, is to get the transport protein. There's a transport protein called GLUT4 that sits in the muscle cell, and then insulin is produced in the pancreas.
Correct.
And then when you eat a meal,
Pancreas is kind of
Yeah.
right behind the stomach,
yeah,
on the liver.
yeah, by the liver. When the body has when we eat a meal and blood sugar rises, the pancreas senses this and goes, "Oh, let's make some insulin." And then insulin's a hormone, so it travels throughout the body, goes to the muscle cell wall, and knocks on the door and says, "Hey, let this sugar in." The muscle doesn't hear it. It's full of gunk. I call it. It's stagnant.
Okay.
Okay. So then what happens is that the pancreas goes, well, I'll show you, I'll make more insulin. So now we're making more insulin. So a lot of people that are pre-diabetic are hyperinsulinemic. They produce lots of insulin. Insulin's anabolic, and anabolic can be good or it can be bad.
Okay.
Okay. In this case, anabolic is growing things you don't want to grow.
Okay.
Like more fat. So in science, there's a concept called a vicious cycle. So with the muscle, it's a vicious cycle. So it's the solution hasn't been found. The muscle cell is still not functioning properly. Okay. So the pancreas is making more insulin and putting more fat in the muscle, which is what the problem is to begin with. The muscle is full of fat. Now there's a word in science
But I
called.
thought insulin was about taking the sugar into the muscle. So why is it all of a sudden changing into fat?
So the insulin. So because the body has to put this dysfunctional fat somewhere,
Okay.
and it's putting more in muscle. Okay, and the main fat, it's a fatty acid byproduct. The main one are called ceramides.
Okay.
Now ceramides, some people know those in cosmetic industry
Correct.
for skin.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, the ceramides are in skin, but they're also in other cells, and they can become very dysfunctional and create a lot of inflammation in the cell. And that's what creates a lot of this insulin resistance in the muscle, is this gunk. Ceramides is one of a number of them, but it's the main one. So what we need to do is figure out, okay, if this is the cause of this issue, if the muscle cell is really full of gunk, and we're not solving the problem by making more insulin. I mean, we're getting the blood sugar into the cell, but we're also creating more gunk in the cell.
Yeah.
So it's just a vicious cycle, a closed loop, and we need to break that cycle. So we're going to get the fat out of the muscle. There's a word called sarcopenia. People starting to hear about it more.
Okay.
Sarcopenia means muscle loss.
Okay.
And especially in aging individuals, we lose muscle
You
and we lose
use
strength.
It, you lose it.
And really, strength is the main thing that I'm interested in, is maintaining healthy strength, so that when somebody's older, they're not frail and they don't fall and they can function
Correct.
independently
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Hold their balance.
Yeah, and so we want to make really strong, healthy muscle and reduce sarcopenia. But there's another word in science now called myosteatosis. Myosteatosis.
Myosteatosis.
Myosteatosis simply means fat muscle, fatty muscle, and it's very common as we age. So our muscles become less muscular and more full of fat, which also creates the insulin resistance. So that's what we really want to work on, is trying to get the fat out of the muscle.
I do want to come back one more time to this. What kind of fat are we talking about that has developed? How did the fat that you're talking about develop, first of all? And number two, how did it get into the muscle?
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
So the fat, like the ceramides.
Because we need fats.
Yeah, we need fats.
We're talking about the wrong fats here.
Ceramides come mostly from palmitic acid.
Which is, for example?
A fatty acid. It's high in meats, it's high in dairy, and then it goes down from there.
So it's an animal fat.
It's primarily an animal fat.
Okay.
And we eat a lot of animal fat, and so we get a lot of palmitic acid, and that contributes to the ceramides in the muscle cell.
Okay.
So part of this is our diet,
All
you
right.
know. And some vegetable oils and things like that can have a lot of palmitic acid.
Just a few
Just a
vegetables.
few.
So
Just a few.
most
Olive
palmitic
oil.
acid-
All oils have some palmitic acid in them. Like
Okay.
olive oil, I was surprised because I really like. I'm a big fan of olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of active compounds in it and omega-9, but it also has a little bit of palmitic acid. But it's all about balance.
Okay.
You know, we're getting too much at certain times. I think most of the fatty meats and things, processed meats and things like that, fast food meats have a lot more.
Oh, that's what we're talking about.
Primarily.
So not grass-fed beef.
Well,
or,
not grass-fed is probably better, but if we've got corn-fed beef, we're going to have more
You have
marbling,
more-
more fat, more palmitic acid in there, which is going to contribute to the problem.
I get you now.
And it's
Okay,
all about
cool.
balance. I'm not
Yes.
saying that no palmitic acid, no, you can never eliminate it, but a lot of us are probably getting too much of it.
So when we
that's-
eat it, it's not a fat that is easily absorbed in the body.
Well, it's absorbed, but then the body, if we're eating too much fat,
Yeah, of
then the
that
body
kind
has
of
to
fat.
do something with
Sure.
it. And that kind of fat is converted into ceramides.
Okay.
Okay, but the body can also convert other things into ceramides too. You know, just more sugars in the diet, more things like that will create more fat also. So all of a sudden, this muscle throughout our body becomes fatty,
Yeah.
and the signal, the insulin signal is not heard. So that's creating the insulin resistance, which is contributing to a rise in blood sugar in the body. And the A1C, you mentioned glycated hemoglobin, or A1C, is simply red blood cells that are. We have a life of a red blood cell in our bodies about 90 days.
90, yeah.
It's flowing around in
So
there.
3 months,
And
yeah.
so sugar, if sugar is in there, and there is always some sugar in there, so the A1C is always going to be some number. But if it's flowing around in there, the sugar is flowing around in there too long, then that red blood cell is going to marry with it, and it becomes its own A1C, its own entity.
Yeah.
And it's toxic to the body.
Yeah.
So we want to reduce that as well.
Yeah, so A1C measures the amount of sugar in a red blood cell over a 3-month period.
It's a nice big window to see.
Yeah.
Not just I tested it today and it's up, and I tested it tomorrow and it's down, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, in 90 days that's a good picture. And as you make health changes, you can also see a drop in your A1C.
Okay, so I tell people, so tell me if I'm wrong, I tell 5.6 is A1C of 5.6 is pretty much the maximum where you want to be.
Yeah.
Anything below is fine.
Yeah.
If you go 5.7 to about 6, I would consider that pre-diabetes.
Probably so, yeah.
And if you go 6.1 and up, you're actually diabetic.
Yeah.
And so I have talked to people who have an A1C of 7.9 or 8, and they are on medication
Yeah.
for diabetes. But I always tell them, you're going to have to change something in your diet and lifestyle to lower that. And they said, no, well, the doctor is okay with me being at 7.9 because I used to be at 9.5 or so.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I go, but you're still diabetic.
Yeah.
You know, and so just to clarify for people when they say, well, what is A1C? It is a great measurement for diabetes.
It's a nice
blood
big
test.
picture of how you're doing. I've
Yeah.
had people as high as 14.
Wow.
And, you know, the A1C test is like the earthquake scale, you know, the
Yeah,
Richter scale.
yeah.
You know, and going from a 4 to a 5 or a 5 to a 6. 7 is like a disaster.
Correct.
You know, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
same with A1C, is you don't want it high. It's damaging. Now, you may not even notice it, but it can, elevated blood sugar will affect every part of your body, from your brain to your eyes to your joints to your circulation to
bet.
your nervous system,
Yes.
the whole bit, and your bones, everything, including your muscle. You know,
Plus, if your blood has too much sugar in it, it acidifies the blood, which is a breeding ground for disease,
yeah,
including cancer.
yeah.
A lot of cancer is caused by a pH imbalance in your blood cells, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Content.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Your blood is your
Yeah.
lifeline of the whole thing. So by targeting and looking specifically at the muscle, knowing that 80% of your blood sugar's got to go through there,
Correct.
what can we do? And so, like I said before, we address it with what you eat and drink, and then, and exercise is extremely important. And then what kind of exercise? How much exercise? All those questions come up.
You bet.
Some right now the popular exercise now is resistance training. It says, well, no, it's not as good. Endurance exercise is maybe not as good. There's people saying all kinds of stuff on the internet about this or that. I think it's a balance. I don't think there's one magic thing. I think somebody can do a little endurance training. Fine, great, that's good. I do. I do a lot of resistance exercise too. So because I still throw my I do the hammer throw and whatnot and whatnot. And so so I want to be strong, but I think it's just getting things moving, and we're just not moving enough. Now let's say we have somebody that's older that maybe can't do a lot, and I have a lot of friends at my gym that are older, but they still do stuff.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a little trouble, then start small, get some resistance bands or something, and just get some movement going and whatnot. And you like you said, you use it or lose it.
Yeah.
And the fact is, we're becoming stagnant and we're not flowing. The flow, I call it flow. We're not flowing anymore, and we need to get that moving. So the exercise is also very, very important for you to do. And
So the resistance training that you talked about, and for there are people who are watching this and say, I don't have time to go to the gym. But if you are not well, you have to figure out a way to move.
Yeah.
Right? And it is not just walking down the street and swinging your arms around up and down a little bit. It is really you have to get disciplined to do some things at home.
Yeah.
And that could be body squats, it could be push-ups, sit-ups, it could be, some kind of a resistance with the body, whereby you engage your muscles.
Yeah.
Right? That is kind of what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Not everybody can afford to go to a gym. Not everybody is close to a gym. There are a lot of people in rural areas that who don't have a gym. And so for them to say, well, okay, I'm giving up, or I'm not going to do this, then I say, if you cannot exercise, then definitely change your diet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, diet is still number one, and how you process is another one. But the diet to me is number one. And if you want to, so I would say, in order to get rid of the carbohydrates, which is often a snacky kind of food most of the time, or potatoes with dinner, and then half your plate is potatoes or vegetables. Vegetables that grow below the ground are usually more sugary also. The ones that are above the ground have a lower glycemic index than the ones that grow under the ground. So that is something you can consider. But also increase your fat intake. Do a flax oil, do olive oil, butter, lard. I think.
Well, but butter and lard, and the new thing is, what's this new
ghee
thing with lard with fats that are,
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Something
escapes me, but anyway, those all have high palmitic acid in them.
Okay.
So again, it's a balance.
Okay.
It might certain fats, certain oils, and whatnot. The ketogenic diet actually can be very beneficial for people with blood sugar issues. It's another thing that can help as well. So.
And I heard that people who go carnivore, primarily meat and maybe some eggs, that it's very difficult for them if they don't add a lot of fat to it. So you kind of go back to a keto diet.
Yeah, but I think it's also choosing the right kind of fat to add to it. That's the key.
So you're not a fan of butter?
Well, I mean, it's higher in palmitic acid, so it's just a cautionary tale.
Does it make a difference if you buy regular butter or grass-fed butter?
Probably not. It's just butter. I don't know. It's just fats, so I don't know. Again, a lot of things we don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know enough to where I can help 100 million people.
Yes.
Get their health straightened out a little bit.
If they want to.
If they want to.
If
they know what to do.
Yeah.
And then they do it.
Correct. So there are people who sometimes they don't want to.
Yeah.
once you explain it to them and becomes practical, then they say, okay, I can do this.
That's where the simplicity thing comes in. It's a simple thing.
You mentioned, and maybe that helps to motivate people as they're watching this. What are some of the diseases that can come out of diabetes? So that people, I would say neuropathy. You were talking about the lady at the bank who had blue legs from
purple legs all the way to her knees. Yeah.
So
her color came back in her legs.
Yeah,
it was
I would say
amazing.
cancer is another one.
Yeah.
Heart disease,
Alzheimer's. Absolutely.
Big
Any circulation issue.
Okay.
Bone loss. All of it. It affects everything.
Yeah.
Our body is a system. So we might, a lot of times we say, well, I need to take this for this or this for this. And then a lot of people wind up on 10 medications or something like that, when we really need to look at it holistically as a system and address it in a system and, get people changing something before it's too late.
There is really no reason to fight diabetes with medication. That's my opinion.
It would be the last resort. Yeah, I'm not anti-metformin, but I think there's a lot of things somebody can do before that. But our medical community is trained in pharmaceuticals. They're educated in it. They have probably 1 hour of nutrition training their whole years of
going to school.
College. And they don't know anything about really exercise, or they're very focused on medication. And part of that too is that they're rewarded. I mean, that's their silo, their lane.
Yeah.
But as individuals watching this, I would say I want to take my health in my own hands a little bit. I want to know what to do, and I don't want to just pop a pill.
No.
We run into people all the time, you and I both, that are on multiple medications, and they're toxic, and it's just one after another. Even my father, when he was alive, he'd had a stroke, and I didn't know this because he wasn't with me. He was down in Southern California, but he was probably on 5 different medications too. Now he lived to be 90, so he had a good run. But still, I think we have to take some of this in our own hands, but we need to know what to do, and it has to be simple for people to understand, and then just get to it, and then measure and see the results, like the A1C test. Just do this for 90 days and see what happens. You'll see a change. I saw a change in 2 months with many people on just supplements. I didn't even talk to them about diet or exercise or intermittent fasting. I'm excited about the changes that can occur.
You talk about 4 steps. Diet is very important. Exercise. You mentioned intermittent fasting, and you mentioned supplements. When we talk about diet, we just did that. By the way, when diabetes gets really bad, you're going to end up with dialysis on your kidneys.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
So too many people are really on dialysis. You see hospitals expanding their dialysis sections in the hospital because so many people have to be scheduled in. And when you hit dialysis, then it's pretty much the end of it, in my opinion. That is just keeping you alive. So when you talk about your dad turning to be 90, and I think it is for everybody, it's not about how long you live, it is the quality of life that you have. Right? There are people who we know who are in their 80s and who still exercise, and actually pretty intensely. They are really in good shape, and they enjoy working out, they enjoy working to a gym, but it also has become a routine for them. So when we go back to the muscle, sugar going into the muscle, the wrong fat going into the muscle, how do we get rid of that? Is it just exercise, as you say, high intensity training, resistance training? I would say the most important thing is turn off the faucet, right? You make sure you don't eat certain foods that keep adding the sugar and the fat. So diet is number 1. Now you're doing the exercises, and that is something that we can talk about in great detail, what kind of exercises work. But men, women, it's all different. Some people are not into high-intensity exercise. They just want to show up and do something. And I still think anything you do is better than not doing anything.
Right.
So I'm not discouraging anybody from saying this is what you need to do. But the point is, if you have a certain disease, or you have an issue, or you yourself are more challenged in a certain health disorder, then you can grab the bull by the horns and just become individualized in your approach. It's not about, well, I saw somebody do this, I'm going to try that. You may have to get a personal trainer. You may have to communicate with a physical therapist, a PT, and just learn what kind of exercises can I do that I can fight this disease.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's things I've worked with colleagues that have been involved in training athletes and whatnot, and I've asked them to put together some video of some very specific core things.
Okay.
One colleague of mine has a website called smarttraining365.com.
Okay, smarttraining365.com.
It was originally developed by a very elite bodybuilder who passed away recently from COVID. Had an issue with that. I follow I do some of their training methodologies when I train, and they're really functional and efficient.
Okay.
Efficiency is very important too in all you do, not just spinning your wheels, but making it work in the minimum amount of time, and being very efficient and getting the results that you want. But that would help somebody get that extra fat weight off. And I really don't like the word weight loss. Weight loss tells me nothing. What did I lose? I joke sometimes that you could go find some railroad tracks and throw your leg across and lose 20 pounds if you wanted to, So, I mean, it's a stupid thing, right?
Yeah.
So what we really want to say is, I want to lose toxic fat. And that most of that toxic fat is in your ectopic fat that we mentioned earlier. And that ectopic fat, you mentioned kidneys and kidney problems. That's ectopic fat causing problems in the kidneys.
Ectopic fat is fat
that's not supposed to be there. Yeah. So when we're young and we're lean and mean, and we have what's
Lots
called
of stem cells
we have subcutaneous fat under our skin. We have a lean waistline, a belly, no belly really. We're playing and doing stuff, and then one day that our diet or lack of exercise and somewhat genetics is involved too. That fat spills over. It's got to go somewhere. That extra calories have to go somewhere. They're not burned. They're going to go somewhere. So now they spill over there and they go to your visceral fat. So your belly grows. But now that gets full. Those fat cells get full.
Yeah.
And then the body goes, well, where am I going to put it? Well, where it's going to put it is in your muscle and in your liver and your kidneys and your pancreas.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. We're in that level for 100 million people.
Yeah.
It's guaranteed they're going to have fatty muscle. And so how do you start to go backwards? How do you pull all this extra dysfunctional fat out? And you're going to do it through the things we're talking about.
Right. Now, explain to us, and it is always an interesting topic to talk about, you often bring up something like, it's called mTOR and AMPK.
Yeah.
Is that a terminology? Is that a supplement? What are we talking about here?
These are two very important enzymes.
Enzymes.
They're enzymes. Enzyme is simply a protein in the body that signals other functions. Okay. mTOR, just to be brief with it, is an anabolic enzyme. Anabolic meaning growing something.
Growing.
Okay. A lot of people that are pre-diabetic are hyperactive mTOR. Okay. We want athletes to be high in mTOR.
Hyperactive mTOR. So
But
they're building something fast.
Yeah, they're building something, but they're building fat. mTOR can also build muscle if it's used properly and in a timely way.
Okay.
So with athletes, the elite athletes that I've worked with over the years, I want them to build mTOR. Muscle, strength, speed, all those things that make an athlete an athlete. Okay, so I'm going to design their nutrition protocols along with their training to help maintain healthy mTOR. But other people are just going about eating stuff. mTOR is growth. It doesn't care what it grows. It can grow fat. It can grow muscle. It's how you trigger it. Okay, so if you're just eating a lot of food and not exercising and everything, and you're not demanding the building of muscle, what's it going to build? It's going to build fat. Okay, so that mTOR is anabolic growth of some
Does it
kind.
have anything to do with calories in, calories out? Or
Sure.
that's unimportant?
That's a big part of it too.
Big part
Sure.
of it,
Yeah,
okay.
big part of it. Yeah, because calories itself will build
mTOR
mTOR.
builds. So
AMP
mTOR is anabolic.
Yeah.
Anabolic means growing something.
Yeah. Now AMPK is AMP kinase. It's an enzyme, and it's an energy deficit enzyme. So in other words, if there's not fuel available, like intermittent fasting is going to build AMPK.
Okay.
Okay.
What is it going to be able to do with AMPK? It
The
stimulates AMPK?
So AMPK is catabolic. So we got mTOR
breaks
anabolic, AMPK is catabolic. Now, does catabolic sound like a good word? It can be good or it can be bad.
I see.
It's also it's relative to what you're doing with it.
Okay.
Okay. So we want to take mTOR, AMPK, and we want to burn that toxic fat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to turn on autophagy, which is self-eating, the cells cleaning themselves out.
Yeah.
I got a bad mitochondria. Okay, mitochondria is where fat is burned. A big problem is dysfunctional mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can trigger AMPK at the right time, we can digest all those cruddy organelles in the cell and clean them out. Okay, we can reduce the toxic fat in the muscle and in the liver and in the kidneys and the pancreas. Okay, and so we want to design it so that it's active at certain times.
Yeah.
We want to use mTOR to build muscle, and we want to use AMPK. And there's another word called PGC1 alpha, not to get too technical, but it's really, PGC1 alpha is really the end game to this whole thing, because it's the major driver of losing this toxic fat.
Okay.
Out of these organelles, the muscle and the liver and whatnot. So I think it's a cycling thing throughout the day. In other words, we're not cycled to build mTOR and grow all day long. We're cycled to build mTOR and grow muscle at certain points.
Correct.
And we're cycled to burn AMPK and PGC1 alpha at other times to reduce the junk, to keep us clean and clean us out and all of that stuff. Yeah.
So when you talk about over 100 million people in this country have prediabetes, that mTOR and AMPK, those two enzymes, are really not doing what they're supposed to do.
They're not in sync. Yeah,
Not in sync.
It's not a matter of good or bad. It's a matter of getting it to elevate at the right time and demanding it do certain things. You know, you want to build mTOR to build muscle and not build, because it will build toxic fat in the muscle.
Yeah.
That's what will create the insulin resistance in the muscle too.
Right.
Yeah.
So mTOR, AMPK is an element of all this, what we're talking about. And by making changes in diet, adjusting, working on the correct type of exercise for us personally, intermittent fasting, including in that, these will all help to make mTOR do the right thing and do AMPK do the right thing.
Yeah, and then the supplement side, like, okay, what can I do nutritionally? You mentioned creatine earlier.
Yeah.
Creatine is anabolic. Okay, so but I want to use it to build muscle. So I wanted to formulate two specific supplements to keep it simple.
Yeah.
One is what I call a booster that's used after a workout in recovery to ramp up mTOR. Okay, during exercise, AMPK is actually ramped up because there's nothing going in, so it's burning, it's working during exercise.
Right.
But post-exercise, if you stress the muscle, now you're transitioning to an opportunity to build mTOR, to build muscle.
To repair.
Yeah, to repair.
Yeah.
Yeah, to repair and build.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've created a booster. It has some amino acids and some creatine and some other things in it and some minerals.
Yeah.
But it's to be used in conjunction with somebody's protein powder, for instance, protein diet.
So it would be a powder in this case?
Yeah, it'll be a powder that you would add to your shake or whatever along with your protein. I didn't want to do a protein because some people like veggie protein, some people like whey, some people like egg protein, on and on and on. So I just created the guts of the booster, the mTOR booster type of a product for that.
Yeah.
The other one's a capsule that has a number of primarily plant-based ingredients that are signaling molecules to turn on the AMPK PGC1 alpha pathway.
Really?
So you take that at other times. For instance, one time that I found very efficient was to take it to take capsules maybe a couple hours or an hour before your exercise, okay, which would boost AMPK during the exercise,
Okay.
along with the exercise, and do it in a fasting state. So I call it the trifecta because
Right.
I'm fasting, that's increasing AMPK. Okay, I'm doing a high intensity exercise for maybe half an hour to an hour, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm taking the additional supplements as signaling molecules for AMPK. So fasting, exercise, supplements, in that sense, is really efficient at burning toxic fat. Very efficient. So, you know.
I know people come in and look for stuff in stores. They're looking for supplements and chromium. Chromium is a mineral
Yeah.
that is very good. I usually recommend that they do a 500 microgram chromium twice a day, so that they have roughly a 24-hour protection. Or chromium helps to speed up the breakdown of carbohydrates or sugars, I understand, and therefore helps to balance blood sugars.
Yeah.
Vitamin D3 actually helps with balancing blood sugars. But most people don't have enough vitamin D, and I highly recommend that they take more. You look at an herb, I think it is, or is gymnema. Is that also a mineral?
Gymnema, yeah.
Gymnema, is it
Gymnema
an herb or
sylvestre.
is that a...
Gymnema is an herb. It's a plant-based compound.
Plant-based compound.
It's been used for a long time
Yeah.
with blood sugar health.
cinnamon,
Cinnamon.
but there are different cinnamons. There is a cinnamon cassia,
Yeah.
Cassia, which is more Chinese cinnamon. And then there is cinnamon Ceylon,
Ceylon, yeah.
or verum is another name for it, Verum, which it means true cinnamon or Ceylon cinnamon. And that's the one that I recommend people try, and I would do it in a powder, mix it in a shake,
Yeah, I put it in my oatmeal.
put it in your oatmeal.
Every time I make oatmeal, I put it in there.
But it does taste much milder. I always have a feeling with cinnamon cassia, you often taste that in cinnamon rolls. It has a little bit of a bite to it when it goes down the throat. And I don't notice that with verum at all. I can do a whole tablespoon, mix it in and take it, and it doesn't bother me. Oils, I would say oils are really important. What are some other suggestions that you would say as far as if people are looking, I think they should definitely check your supplements that you are developing, because you have done the science on it.
Yeah, and I tried to make it not everything, okay? I mean,
Right.
I didn't want to do an oil-based thing, but I think an oil-based with maybe some, the oils that I would think would be functional would be omega-3 fish oils would be useful.
Yeah.
Black cumin seed oil.
I heard about that.
Black
Yeah, I
cumin
mean,
seed
I know
oil.
that is also
Black
for
cumin.
pain, but it is
Yeah, and it has
also...
thymoquinone. It's a very good anti-cancer preventive. So it's available too. And those are the main.
Berberine.
Berberine, as far as the nutritional side, the plant-based side, berberine, resveratrol,
Many antioxidants.
EGCG, polyphenols.
Astaxanthin.
Yeah, anything with polyphenols, flavonoids. A lot of those have good science as far as improving blood sugar health. And again, the pathway for them is going to be mainly focused on AMPK, PGC1 alpha. I mean, that's the main one we want to. We want to get rid of the gunk out of the muscle, and we're going to get that through a number of ways that we've talked about. But the supplement side can be a booster to that too.
Yeah.
But it's not everything. I mean, I started with my mom with a supplement kind of by accident.
Yeah,
but then I thought, I want to know more. And I studied thousands of papers over the last 20 years, working with other people and talking to scientists and whatnot. And the science is ever changing. It's never absolute.
That's why
Scientists can never
right?
agree on anything.
Yeah,
it
sad,
is what
isn't
it is. But you look at the big picture of kind of where this is all going, and these two pathways, the mTOR and the AMPK PGC1 alpha pathway, will help regulate this. Get the fat out of the muscle and help build the muscle, a healthy, strong muscle, active muscle. Yeah.
So that it can burn more
sugars. The muscle is now
and that it can accept
now an efficient
fat and insulin.
an efficient fat burner. Yeah, and it's not just going into fat cells and sitting there; it's actually being burned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really good. We're coming to the end of the interview today. I really appreciate what you tell us, and I'm sure it definitely makes me think, and it makes a lot of people think. there are ways that we can avoid diabetes in the first place. I think that parents should be more careful what they themselves eat as far as setting an example to their young children. They should really, as a family, eat more balanced so that there is not this continuous craving for food dyes and food additives and let's call it not the healthiest food. Often it is kind of a junky kind of food. We need to look at ingredients. It is good to eat to read the ingredients on the box, and if you can, go back to simplicity instead of boxed food and processed foods, because we just don't always know what is in it as far as flavorings are concerned, etc. So diet is important. And I really feel it has started at a young age, but that is usually stimulated through parents and what they do. And I feel what your comment is about the exercises and to understand the mTOR and the AMPK enzymes better is important. Intermittent fasting, it's not something that's easy for me. I don't know. I'm not good in eating within an 8-hour window and not doing anything for 16 hours. But maybe I'll get back into it.
Yeah. Let me add just one thing quickly. I do intermittent fasting rarely, but when I do it with that 3-part thing. I take a supplement, I do it in a fasted state, and then I exercise.
Yes.
That's when I use it. I'm not I'm not fasting all day long or several hours, but let's say I had a meal the night before at like 6 or 7. Then the next day I would work at home. This is usually on my day off.
Sure.
And I'm working at home on my computer, and I'll go take a supplement to trigger AMPK. Okay. And then I'll go to the I'm in a fasted state. I haven't eaten anything all morning long, so now I'm fasted and I'm creating a want for energy, but there is none. So AMPK will be increased in that window. And then I go to the gym and I'll do exercise. I may do the bike for 20 minutes or something like that at a high intensity, and then I'll do some weightlifting. Yeah. And then I'll run a few errands, and I'll come home, and then I'll have my protein shake.
And that is then
and that's
what
it.
time?
It's a window, and it works phenomenal.
That could be what 3 o'clock in the afternoon by now?
By then probably.
So
because I go to the gym
about
12, about noon or 1 sometimes. And I'm never. At the beginning, I would take a protein shake with me because I thought, gosh, am I going to get dizzy? Am I going to pass out? What the hell?
Yeah, blood sugar.
I'm used to. I think my body is programmed for it. I do it maybe once a week, sometimes twice a week, but usually just once. Yeah. And it works great. Yeah, and it definitely works. It takes the fat off. Yeah. And and your strength will go up because you're working out. So it's a win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the last step is possibly supplements. So you are creating supplements, which is really good because you're focused. But if people are looking for supplements, things like chromium picolinate or chromium, GTF chromium, glucose tolerance factor for chromium, cinnamon, and do a tablespoon. More fat, coconut oil could help, olive oil, fish oil, flax oil, in my opinion. Sure.
Berberine.
Gymnema sylvestre, berberine would be a good one. And I think that if you incorporate all that, that's one thing. But people who are not changing their diet or their lifestyle and just take supplements, they will do something positive, but it is really just scratching the surface. You're just prolonging the journey. All the other things need to be in place.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Thanks, Rick.
Totally. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for all the information. Yeah, you bet.
It.
And folks, please think about these things. If you are at a risk for diabetes, if you have been diagnosed with prediabetes, if you are diabetic at this point, by all means, you can reverse it. You can turn everything back to a very healthy state. But you can ask anybody. Eventually, it's going to come down to you taking the first step. If you take the first step, there are a lot of people there to support you on your journey. There are a lot of methods to support you on that journey. And I guarantee you, you will be successful. So thank you very much for watching today. Tune in for another episode of Health in Focus with Jacobus next time. And hopefully you will do that. Have a good day.
Visit healthinfocusnow.com.